Once they were brothers. Not by blood, but by something far deeper, the Force itself. They fought side by side, laughed together, bled together, and saved each other's lives more times than either could count. But in the burning skies of a dying galaxy, their bond shattered. And one of the greatest friendships in history turned into one of the most devastating duels ever fought. This is not just a story about Star Wars. This is the tragedy of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, how love became hate, how hope became despair, and how two heroes destroyed each other for the fate of the galaxy. And tonight, I'll take you through every moment, every choice, every word, every scream. The story you thought you knew, but never truly understood. Until now. Part 1, Brothers in the Light, the story of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker does not begin on a battlefield, nor with lightsabers drawn, but with two very different lives converging under the will of the Force. Obi-Wan was already a Jedi Knight when Anakin first came into his life, a man disciplined, calm, devoted to duty. Anakin was a boy from the sands of Tatooine, wild with curiosity, carrying the burden of prophecy. When Qui-Gon Jinn brought Anakin before the Jedi Council, the boy was not just unusual, he was unprecedented. The Force surrounded him like a storm, stronger than any being the Jedi had seen in generations. Obi-Wan had been skeptical at first. The Council feared the danger in training someone so old, someone already attached to the world he came from. But fate doesn't ask permission. Qui-Gon's death on Naboo changed everything. With his master gone, Obi-Wan took on the responsibility himself, promising to train Anakin. Not just as a Jedi, but as the man Qui-Gon believed he could become. Those first years were full of clashes. Obi-Wan was methodical, precise, and cautious. Anakin was not. He leapt before thinking, challenged authority at every turn, and believed rules were cages meant to be broken. And yet there was something unshakable between them. When they fought in battle, it was as if they moved with one mind. When they disagreed, there was still an unspoken trust that the other would always have his back. The Clone Wars forged that trust in fire. From the dusty worlds of Geonosis to the icy corridors of Orto Plutonia, from city streets to the void of space, they faced death together more times than most men could count in a lifetime. They saved each other's lives so many times that keeping track became pointless. Soldiers whispered about them in the barracks, how the negotiator and the hero with no fear could turn the tide of any battle simply by arriving, but beneath the victories, cracks were already forming. Obi-Wan still held to the Jedi code with unyielding discipline. Anakin, however, had begun bending the rules to suit his heart, and more dangerously, his fears. He believed love could be hidden, attachments could be justified, and that sometimes the ends did justify the means. Obi-Wan saw the danger, but also saw the boy he had raised, the man he had fought beside, and he could not bring himself to truly confront him. They laughed together, they argued like brothers, they stood as each other's shadow in every campaign. But somewhere in those years, destiny had already begun to pull them apart. And when the war would end, one of them would not stand beside the other. Part 2. Shadows over the Republic. The Clone Wars were more than just a galactic conflict. They were a slow-burning crucible, reshaping not only planets and politics, but the souls of those who fought in them. For Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, it was a test of loyalty, not only to the Republic, but to each other. From the outside, they remained a legendary duo. Mission after mission, they brought victory where others would have faced disaster. But war changes people, even heroes. And for Anakin Skywalker, the change came faster than anyone could control. Every battle added weight to his shoulders. Every clone soldier lost cut deeper into him. He began to see the Jedi's detachment, their insistence on not forming attachments as a weakness, even a cruelty. To Anakin, these weren't just troops. They were brothers, each life precious. But to the Jedi Council, they were an army, necessary but replaceable. The more Anakin saw this gap between himself and the Jedi way, the more he felt like an outsider in his own order. And there was someone who saw this growing fracture and knew exactly how to exploit it: Chancellor Palpatine. Palpatine had been close to Anakin since the beginning of the war, always with a word of praise, always validating his instincts where the Jedi Council would scold him. Over the years, their relationship deepened into something Anakin lacked in the council chambers: trust. Palpatine spoke to him not as a commander to a subordinate, but as a friend, even a father figure. He planted ideas gently, never pushing too far at once. "The Jedi don't always see the bigger picture, Anakin," he would say. "Sometimes we must be willing to do what they cannot." Obi-Wan noticed. He never trusted Palpatine's influence over Anakin, but the Chancellor was the supreme leader of the Republic. Confronting him directly would have been political suicide. Instead, Obi-Wan tried to guide Anakin himself, offering advice, tempering his more reckless impulses, urging patience. But patience was something Anakin had never mastered. There were moments in the war that would echo in their future clash, moments where Anakin's power scared even Obi-Wan. On Jabium, when the losses piled high, Anakin's anger drove him to push harder than any Jedi should, cutting through enemies with a ferocity that made even the clone troopers glance away. On other worlds, he defied council orders outright if he believed they would cost lives. To him, that was compassion. To the Jedi, it was dangerous disobedience. And through it all, the friendship between master and apprentice endured, but the shadows were growing. Every argument about strategy ended a little more bitterly. Every disagreement about the council's decisions cut a little deeper. Obi-Wan still loved Anakin like a brother, but somewhere in his heart, he began to wonder if Qui-Gon's faith in the boy had blinded them all to a more dangerous truth. What neither of them could see yet was that the war itself was the trap, a design by Darth Sidious to stretch the galaxy, the Jedi and their bond to the breaking point. Part 3. The Temptation of Power. By the third year of the Clone Wars, the cracks in Anakin Skywalker's allegiance to the Jedi had widened into deep fractures. He was still the Republic's greatest warrior, still Obi-Wan's trusted partner in battle, but inside, a storm was brewing. It wasn't hatred, not yet. It was fear. Fear of losing everything he loved. Anakin's secret life as a husband to Padmé Amidala was already a direct violation of the Jedi Code. To Obi-Wan, Padmé was a trusted ally, a friend, and someone he suspected Anakin cared for deeply, perhaps too deeply. But Obi-Wan never confronted him. Whether out of loyalty, denial, or fear of what that conversation would do to their bond, he let it remain unspoken. That silence would prove costly. One night, after a grueling campaign, Anakin had a vision, vivid, terrifying, and impossible to ignore. Padmé, pregnant, screaming in pain. Dying in childbirth, he awoke in a cold sweat. The image burned into his mind. The Force had sent him dreams before, and they had always come true. The thought of losing her tore through him like a blade. He swore to himself he would find a way to stop it, no matter the cost. That was when Palpatine made his move. The Chancellor had always been a constant presence, praising Anakin's skills, listening to his frustrations, and slowly undermining his faith in the Jedi Council. But now he offered something more dangerous: knowledge. Over private conversations, he began speaking about the Sith, not as monsters, but as pragmatists wielding power unrestrained by dogma. He told Anakin the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord who, according to legend, could use the Force to prevent death itself. To Anakin, this wasn't philosophy, it was salvation. If such power existed, he had to learn it. he would learn it. And Palpatine, ever the serpent, hinted that together they could uncover it. But only if Anakin was willing to step beyond the limits the Jedi had placed upon him. The Council, meanwhile, was growing uneasy with both Palpatine's increasing control over the Republic and his closeness to Anakin. In an unprecedented move, they asked Anakin to spy on the Chancellor. It was a decision that cut him to the core. The Jedi, the very people who had raised him, were now asking him to betray the man who had been a mentor and friend for years. When Anakin brought this frustration to Obi-Wan, their conversation was tense. Obi-Wan urged him to see the bigger picture, that the Council acted in the Republic's best interest. But Anakin heard only hypocrisy. To him, the Jedi were no longer the pure guardians of peace they claimed to be. They were playing politics and using him as a pawn. Palpatine's trap was almost complete. He had positioned himself as the only one who truly understood Anakin, the only one who trusted him completely. And the more Anakin felt the Jedi were holding him back, the more he leaned toward the man who promised him the power to save the one person he could not live without. The war outside raged on. But for Anakin Skywalker, the real battle, the one that would decide the fate of the galaxy, was already raging inside his heart. Part 5, The Fall of Anakin Skywalker. The night air over Coruscant was heavy, thick with tension that could almost be felt in the Force itself. In the Jedi Temple, Anakin paced, unable to calm the storm in his mind. His duty pulled him one way, his love another. Every step he took echoed through the empty corridors like the ticking of a clock counting down to an irreversible decision. Mace Windu's voice echoed in his head. "If what you have told me is true, you will have earned my trust." Palpatine's voice followed. "The power to save Padme from certain death will be in your grasp, but only if you learn the ways of the dark side." Minutes felt like hours. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Padme's face, pale, lifeless, gone. He had already lost his mother because he was too late. He could not, would not, let history repeat itself. His heartbeat was loud in his ears when he finally made the decision. He took his speeder into the neon-soaked night of Coruscant, the city below a blur of speeders, towers, and lights. He didn't think, didn't he hesitate. He only knew he had to get to the Chancellor's office before it was too late. When he arrived, chaos had already erupted. Mace Windu and 3 Jedi Masters stood against Palpatine. 2 of them were already dead. The remaining Master, Kit Fisto, fell seconds later. Windu's purple blade clashed against Sidious red in a storm of strikes, lightning flashing through the air. Anakin stepped inside, torn. He wanted to scream, to stop them both. Palpatine, his face twisted with rage, hurled Force lightning at Mace, only to have it reflected back at him. The Chancellor's features began to deform, burned and scarred by his own power. Mace had Sidious pinned, his saber inches from the Sith Lord's throat. "He's too dangerous to be kept alive," Mace shouted. To Anakin, those words rang with finality, not justice, but execution. "It's not the Jedi way," Anakin pleaded. But Mace's focus never wavered. "I have to end this." In that moment, the choice crystallized. If Mace killed Palpatine, the only man who might teach Anakin how to save Padme would be gone forever. In one desperate motion, Anakin ignited his lightsaber and drove it toward Mace. The purple blade faltered, and with a cry of shock and betrayal, the Jedi Master was thrown back by a blast of Force lightning, crashing through the shattered window and into the night. The silence afterward was deafening. Anakin stood frozen, his weapon still in hand, the reality of what he'd done sinking in like ice through his veins. He had just attacked a Jedi Master, killed him, for a Sith Lord. Palpatine's voice broke the silence. Soft and almost comforting. "You did the right thing, Anakin." He was going to destroy us. But then came the final hook. "Only together can we discover the secret to cheat death." Anakin's shoulders sagged. His breathing was ragged. He whispered the words as if they were a surrender. "I will do whatever you ask." The Chancellor straightened, his hood casting his deformed face into shadow. "Good. First, you must become my apprentice. Henceforth you shall be known as Darth Vader." The name felt foreign in his ears, but in that moment, Anakin Skywalker died, not in body, but in spirit. In his place stood something darker, colder, more resolute. His first order from his new master was as chilling as it was decisive. Every single Jedi, including their younglings, must be wiped out. Anakin didn't flinch, he only nodded. And with that, the galaxy's brightest hope had become its greatest weapon of destruction. Part 6, Order 66. The sun over Coruscant was setting, casting a blood-red glow over the skyline as Anakin Skywalker strode toward the Jedi Temple gates. But this was not the man his fellow Jedi knew. His eyes, once burning with hope and passion, now glinted with a cold, unnatural fire. His walk was purposeful, unyielding. At his side, marching in perfect formation, was the elite clone squad of the 501st Legion, soldiers who had fought alongside the Jedi for years, their trust unshakable, until this day. Inside the temple, Jedi Masters and young Padawans went about their routines, unaware that death was walking through their front doors. The silence broke only when the blaster fire began. The clones' rifles erupted in flashes of blue energy, cutting down Jedi without hesitation. Cries of confusion and betrayal filled the air. These were friends, allies, brothers in arms. But the clones did not falter. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, the brilliant blue blade hissing to life. At first, some Jedi thought he had come to help, but their hope shattered when he cut down the first of them in a single, merciless strike. There was no hesitation, no remorse. He fought with the precision of a master duelist and the fury of a man possessed. In the council chamber, younglings, barely old enough to wield a training saber, huddled together in fear. One small boy stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do?" Anakin's answer was silence. He ignited his blade. The slaughter was total. Every corridor became a killing ground. The temple's towering spires glowed with fire and smoke, visible from every corner of the city. Far across the galaxy, in system after system, similar tragedies unfolded. The command went out across every clone comlink: execute Order 66. In an instant, Jedi everywhere were betrayed by the soldiers they had trusted with their lives. On Kashyyyk, Master Yoda felt the betrayal in the Force before it happened, leaping from his perch and decapitating the clones who had turned on him. On Utapau, Obi-Wan Kenobi was riding his lizard-like mount when Commander Cody received the order. Without hesitation, Cody commanded his artillery to fire, sending a blast that knocked Obi-Wan into the planet's sinkhole depths. One by one, the lights of the Jedi Order were extinguished. What had stood for thousands of years was undone in a single night. When the last blaster was silenced in the Jedi Temple, Anakin stood amidst the carnage, the glow of his saber casting shadows across the bodies of the fallen. His breathing was steady, his face unreadable. In his mind, he told himself this was for Padmé, that every drop of blood spilled was a step closer to saving her. But deep inside, a darker truth was taking root. This was no longer about saving one life. This was about power, control, and the intoxicating certainty that came with it. And somewhere across the galaxy, Obi-Wan Kenobi was still alive. Part 7, The Hunt for the Survivors. The galaxy had changed overnight. Where once the Jedi Order stood as guardians of peace and justice, now only fear and silence remained. The Republic broadcast painted the massacre as an act of necessary security, claiming that the Jedi had attempted to overthrow the Chancellor. But those who survived knew the truth. The Republic had become the Empire, and the Jedi were its first victims. On the swampy world of Dagobah, Yoda's escape from Kashyyyk was not without pain. The death of countless Jedi echoed in the Force like a chorus of screams. Each loss was a dagger to his soul, and yet he endured. His purpose was clear: survival and the preservation of what little hope remained. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan Kenobi was alive, battered, dirty, and stranded in Utapau's Sinkhole City. The moment Cody's betrayal became clear, Obi-Wan's mind spun. This wasn't a random act of treachery. It was coordinated, precise, and galaxy-wide. As he commandeered a small starfighter to flee, his thoughts turned to one person: Anakin. If Anakin had survived, they could regroup and rally the Jedi, or so Obi-Wan hoped. Those hopes shattered when Bail Organa's ship, the Tantive III, picked up Obi-Wan's distress signal and brought him aboard. There, in the stark light of the ship's briefing chamber, Yoda and Obi-Wan were reunited, but the reunion was heavy with grief. It was then that Senator Bail Organa delivered the crushing news: the Jedi Temple was burning. A security beacon had been activated, warning all Jedi to return, but Obi-Wan knew instantly that it was a trap. Someone had reprogrammed the beacon to lure survivors into their deaths. Determined to find the truth, Obi-Wan and Yoda infiltrated the smoldering ruins of the temple. The once sacred halls were littered with the bodies of Jedi Knights, their robes scorched and their lightsabers dark. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hiss of sparking wires and the distant groan of collapsing durasteel. Obi-Wan accessed the temple's security archives, his fingers trembling slightly as he activated the hologram playback. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. In flickering blue light, Anakin Skywalker appeared, marching through the temple gates with the 501st Legion at his back. There was no hesitation in his movements, no mercy in his strikes. He cut down Jedi Masters, Padawans, even the defenseless younglings, his lightsaber a blur of deadly blue. Obi-Wan's throat tightened. His mind rejected the image, but the truth was undeniable. Anakin was the one who had led the massacre. His friend, his brother, his student. Yoda's voice broke the heavy silence. Destroy the Sith, we must. But Obi-Wan's heart sank further when Yoda spoke their plan. The Sith were two: Darth Sidious and Darth Vader. Yoda would confront Sidious. Obi-Wan would have to face Anakin. At first, Obi-Wan refused. "I cannot kill Anakin," he said, his voice cracking. "He is like my brother." But Yoda's gaze was firm. "Twisted by the dark side, young Skywalker has become. The boy you trained, gone he is, consumed by Darth Vader." It was no longer about choice, it was about necessity. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Darth Vader hunted down the last flickers of Jedi resistance. Every mission he took was swift and brutal, no survivors, no mercy. The mere whisper of his name began to spread through the galaxy, striking fear even in those who had never seen his face. But one last hunt remained, the one that would decide the fate of the galaxy and the hearts of the people who once believed in the Jedi: Obi-Wan. Kenobi was on his way to find the man who was once Anakin Skywalker. Part 8: The Confrontation on Mustafar. A planet that looked like it had been born in fire and never cooled. Rivers of molten lava flowed across its jagged surface, casting an angry red glow against a sky filled with ash and black smoke. The air shimmered with unbearable heat, and every breath felt heavy, as if the planet itself resisted life. It was here that Darth Vader, the man who was once Anakin Skywalker, had come to finish the last steps of his transformation. The Separatist leaders, those who had funded and fueled the Clone Wars, huddled together inside their fortress, unaware that their new ally had no intention of letting them live. When the doors slid open, they relaxed, thinking Anakin had come to negotiate their safety. But the expression on his face was cold, unrecognizable. His lightsaber ignited with a hiss. The room erupted into screams and chaos, but none of them escaped. Vader moved like a shadow, a predator, every strike fueled by anger and the belief that he was creating a new, better galaxy. When the last separatist fell, the fortress fell silent, save for the low rumble of Mustafar's volcanic ground. From orbit, Obi-Wan Kenobi's ship cut through the smoke-choked sky. Inside, Padme Amidala clutched her growing belly, her heart torn between disbelief and fear. She refused to believe Anakin had become what Obi-Wan claimed, a murderer, a traitor. Against Obi-Wan's warning, she insisted she could reach him, bring him back from the darkness. When they landed on the landing platform, the heat was suffocating. Padme ran ahead, her voice desperate as she called out, "Anakin!" Vader emerged from the fortress, his silhouette framed by the boiling lava beyond. For a moment, seeing Padme, his face softened. But then his eyes narrowed at the sight of Obi-Wan stepping out behind her. "What are you doing here?" Vader demanded, his voice sharp. Padme pleaded with him, her words breaking, telling him about the horrors he had committed, about the fear he was spreading. Anakin's voice rose with anger. He spoke of how the Jedi had lied to him, how Palpatine had shown him the truth, how he had brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to the galaxy. And then, the moment that shattered what little remained between them. Anakin saw Obi-Wan as the enemy, as the one who had turned Padme against him. In a flash of rage, he reached out with the Force, his invisible grip closing around Padme's throat. She gasped, clawing at her neck, her eyes wide with shock and pain. "Let her go, Anakin!" Obi-Wan shouted, stepping forward. Vader's grip tightened, until at last he released her, letting her collapse to the ground unconscious. His eyes locked on Obi-Wan with pure hatred. "You turned her against me!" Anakin roared. "You have done that yourself," Obi-Wan replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. And then, without another word, Vader's lightsaber ignited. The deep crimson blade bathed his face in red light. Obi-Wan drew his own saber, the blue glow cutting through the heat haze between them. What followed was one of the most intense, emotionally charged duels in galactic history. They clashed with an explosion of light and sound, their blades striking with the force of years of training and years of brotherhood turned against each other. The battle raged across the platform, into the industrial heart of Mustafar's mining complex. Sparks showered from machinery as they fought on narrow catwalks over rivers of lava, each man trying to end the other while also defending against every lethal strike. Their movements were perfectly matched. Obi-Wan knew Anakin's style, every strength and every weakness. Anakin knew Obi-Wan's counters, his defensive patience. They were locked in a deadly mirror match, neither able to land a killing blow. Lava erupted around them, spraying molten fire into the air. The sound of the planet's fury mixed with their labored breathing, the clash of sabers, and the occasional shout of rage or pain. The fight spilled out onto floating platforms, drifting toward the edge of a massive lava fall. The heat was unbearable now, their clothes singed, sweat pouring down their faces. Still, neither yielded. At last, Obi-Wan leapt from his platform onto the blackened slope of a lava bank, gaining the high ground. His voice was desperate but steady. "It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground." But Anakin's arrogance, fueled by the dark side, left no room for caution. "You underestimate my power," he growled. "Don't try it," Obi-Wan warned. Anakin lunged, and in one swift, heart-wrenching motion, Obi-Wan struck. The blow severed Anakin's legs and his remaining organic arm. His body tumbled down to the lava's edge, landing on the black sand. The heat began to scorch his skin instantly. His screams were a mix of agony and rage as the fire of Mustafar consumed him. Obi-Wan stood frozen, tears in his eyes, his lightsaber still in hand. "You were the chosen one," he shouted over Anakin's screams. "It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them, bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. I hate you." Anakin roared, his eyes burning with hatred even as flames engulfed him. Obi-Wan's voice broke. "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." Unable to deliver the final blow, Obi-Wan turned and walked away, leaving Anakin to his fate. He picked up Anakin's lightsaber, the same one he would one day pass to Luke Skywalker, and left with Padme aboard the ship. Behind him, the man once known as Anakin Skywalker was swallowed by the flames, but from those flames, Darth Vader would rise. Part 9. The birth of Darth Vader. The choking smoke and burning ash filled the air around the smoldering banks of Mustafar. The once mighty Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker lay broken, his body ravaged by molten rock and searing flames. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and death. His breathing was shallow and ragged, mechanical, each gasp forced through the crude respirator that now sustained his life. Far above, a shadowed figure approached in a sleek shuttle. Darth Sidious, the Sith Lord who had orchestrated the galaxy's downfall. His presence was cold, calculated, yet there was a twisted satisfaction in his eyes as he surveyed the fallen apprentice. Sidious descended swiftly, his steps confident as he reached the injured man. Anakin's flesh was burned beyond recognition, his limbs charred and useless. Yet beneath the horror lay a flicker of life, powered by the dark side and the will to survive. "Rise, my apprentice," Sidious said, voice smooth as silk but edged with menace. He summoned his power through the Force, binding Anakin's broken body with threads of energy, stabilizing him just enough for extraction. Within hours, Anakin was aboard the Emperor's flagship, the Executor. Medical droids and Sith alchemists worked tirelessly to preserve what remained of him. Limbs were amputated and replaced with black cybernetic prosthetics, mechanical limbs that hissed and clicked with each movement. His lungs, irreparably damaged by the toxic smoke, were replaced with a complex life support system housed in the infamous mask and chest plate. The process was excruciating. Anakin's mind teetered on the edge of consciousness and madness. His screams echoed through the sterile halls, mingling with the hum of machines. But beneath the pain and the new shell of armor, something else was born, a symbol of fear, power, and absolute control. As the mask sealed over his face, a deep, mechanical breathing filled the room, a sound that would haunt the galaxy for decades to come. Darth Vader was no longer a man, but a weapon forged in fire and shadow. In his first moments of awareness, Vader's mind was a storm of anger and confusion. Memories of Padme, Obi-Wan, and the Jedi flashed like lightning in his thoughts. But the Emperor's voice cut through the chaos, steady and commanding. "You are mine now," Sidious intoned. "Together we will crush the Jedi and rule the galaxy." Vader bowed, not out of respect but acceptance of his new role. The man who had once dreamed of saving the galaxy was now its enforcer of darkness. Back on Coruscant, the Senate gathered to hear Chancellor Palpatine's new decree. The Galactic Empire was born, with the Emperor at its head. The Jedi were declared enemies of the state, hunted relentlessly by Vader and the newly formed Imperial Inquisitors. The galaxy fell into shadow, hope buried beneath the iron fist of the Sith. But even in the darkest night, whispers of rebellion stirred. Obi-Wan Kenobi retreated to the desert world of Tatooine, watching from afar as Vader hunted down any remnants of the Jedi. He was the silent guardian of a new hope, his former student son, Luke Skywalker. And so, the stage was set for the ultimate battle between light and dark. A battle that would define the fate of the galaxy for generations to come. Part 10. legacy, and hope. The galaxy trembled under the oppressive grip of the Galactic Empire, its iron fist tightening as years passed. The Emperor Darth Sidious ruled with ruthless efficiency, but his empire, though vast, was built on fear. The winds of rebellion began to stir in the far corners of the galaxy, unnoticed by many, but not by all. In the vast deserts of Tatooine, Obi-Wan Kenobi remained hidden, living in exile and watching over the last hope of the Jedi Order, Luke Skywalker. The boy, now a young man, lived unaware of the legacy that flowed through his veins, a legacy that tied him to both the light and dark sides of the Force. Obi-Wan had never forgotten the promise he made to Anakin to protect his son, and to ensure that one day the galaxy would find balance again. Obi-Wan's days were quiet and solitary, spent in a small desert hut. He wore the guise of a hermit, blending into the sands, always watching for signs of the Empire's reach. His thoughts were consumed with guilt and sorrow, yet he never stopped believing in the possibility of redemption for Anakin. In the quiet nights, he would often look to the twin suns setting on the horizon, thinking of the day when Anakin had fallen and of the hope that Luke would be able to redeem what had been lost. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Emperor's grip tightened. Darth Vader, the fallen Anakin Skywalker, had become the dark enforcer of the Empire. His name struck fear into the hearts of billions, and the presence of his black armored figure was the herald of death. The Jedi were all but extinct, hunted down by Vader and the Imperial Inquisitors, the last remnants of the Order reduced to a handful of survivors scattered across the galaxy. The Empire's war machine crushed all opposition, and it seemed that the darkness would reign forever. But even as the Empire grew stronger, so too did the spark of rebellion. Secret cells began to form, loosely united in their desire to overthrow the tyrannical rule of the Emperor. These cells were often fragmented, isolated, but there was one leader, one figurehead that united them all, Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan. As a senator and member of the Imperial Senate, she had always been a vocal critic of the Empire. But when her adoptive father, King Bail Organa, was assassinated by the Emperor's agents, she took up the mantle of rebellion, leading a movement that sought to restore the galaxy to its rightful state. It was Leia who would become the first to carry the torch of hope, unknowingly passing it to the son of the man who had helped create the Empire, Luke Skywalker. The Rebel Alliance's boldest move came when they stole the plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, a massive space station capable of destroying entire planets. It was, in essence, a weapon designed to ensure the Empire's complete domination of the galaxy. The plans, stored in the droids R2-D2 and C-3PO, were carried across the stars to the desert planet of Tatooine, where fate would intervene. Luke, working as a moisture farmer on Tatooine, stumbled upon the droids. When he found the message from Princess Leia embedded in R2-D2's memory banks, his world was forever changed. The adventure he had been unknowingly destined for was now upon him. Obi-Wan Kenobi came to him, revealing the truth of his heritage, that he was the son of Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one who was to bring balance to the Force. Luke's journey had begun. The decision to take up his father's legacy, not as the dark enforcer of the Empire, but as a Jedi, would be the most difficult of his life. It was Obi-Wan who guided Luke through the early stages of his training, teaching him the ways of the Force and the Jedi, but Obi-Wan knew that the final test would be one of the hardest battles the galaxy would face, the confrontation between Luke and his father, Darth Vader. As Luke ventured deeper into the rebellion's fight, the Emperor continued to tighten his grip. Darth Vader's hunt for the Rebel Alliance was unrelenting. Despite his power and fearsome reputation, there was a glimmer of doubt in Vader's heart. He knew that he was bound to the Emperor, but part of him, The part that had once been Anakin still longed for something else, something greater than power and control. He could feel the pull of the Force from his son, and for the first time in years, the darkness that surrounded him began to crack. The moment of reckoning came on the forest moon of Endor, where the Rebel Alliance launched its final assault on the Empire's second Death Star. Luke, knowing that his destiny lay in facing his father, confronted Darth Vader. The two clashed in the heart of the Empire's ultimate weapon, their lightsabers flashing with the fury of their emotions. But Luke, steadfast in his belief in the light, refused to strike down his father. In that moment, the Emperor's true power was revealed. Sidious had planned for this. He saw the potential in Luke to become the new vessel of the dark side, the new apprentice who would succeed Vader. With the Force, Sidious unleashed a torrent of lightning upon Luke, hoping to destroy him once and for all. It was then that the final act of redemption occurred. Vader, Anakin, could feel the suffering of his son, and for the first time in over 2 decades, the man who had been consumed by the dark side made a choice. With a cry of agony, he turned on his master. In a final act of defiance, Anakin Skywalker, once lost to the dark side, saved his son and destroyed the Emperor. With Sidious gone, the Death Star was destroyed, and the Empire began to crumble. The galaxy, once overshadowed by tyranny and fear, breathed a sigh of relief. The rebellion had won. Anakin's redemption came at a great cost, but his actions helped to restore balance to the Force. His son Luke became the new hope of the Jedi, the one who would rebuild the Order and ensure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. The Force was in balance once again, and the Jedi returned to their rightful place as guardians of peace in the galaxy. And so the brothers were gone, replaced by legends, one of hope, one of fear. Yet their story still echoes across generations, because it's not just about Jedi and Sith. It's about us, about loyalty, love, and the choices we make when everything is on the line. If this journey moved you, if you felt the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the fire of Mustafar, then keep it alive. Like this video so others can find it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. And if you want to walk through more hidden corners of the galaxy with me, subscribe, because this is only the beginning.